Rev up your engines!
Well, it looks like Toyota hit the nail on the head. Toyota nearly doubled its operating profit last year, taking the title away from Tesla as the most profitable motor manufacturer in the world. Now, of course, it was kind of a joke that Tesla was one, but it's because they made tremendous markups on the cars that they did sell. First, ones who wanted to try electric cars bought them. Nah, they're having a hard time selling them. And Toyota, who said, hey, electric cars, you're pushing them too fast, they've taken over the lead with actual cars they're selling and not electric cars. As Toyota really doesn't make them. They make one model. It was a massive failure. They're waiting on electric cars to see what's going to happen. And now they're back on top. Electric cars and their prices, it's starting to fade away. It's getting back to what makes actual sense. To give you an example, for the last couple of years, a lot of times you had to pay more for a used Tesla than a new one because you couldn't get a new one, they couldn't make them fast enough, so the price of the used ones went up. Well, back in the day when Tesla first came out, I had a customer in Houston who bought a used Tesla Model S. It had 15,000 miles on it. He bought it for $45,000. The original owner paid $125,000 for the same car, showing that when it had 15,000 miles, now it was only worth $45,000. And that's basically what that. Check out the price of used electric cars today. I just saw one. It was a used Volvo electric car. New it was 60 grand. Used it was 25 with 30,000 miles on it. The prices are starting to drop as people are realizing they don't like the cars. It's not what they want. They bought the wrong car. They're already selling. In the case of the Volvo, they've only made them for 2 years, 2022 and 2023. So the year-old 2022 ones are going cheap because nobody wants them. And now it's coming to fruition that this electric car fantasy is just that. It's not going to take over. It's not going to make a fortune. And all these clowns that are building them are going to be scratching their rear ends thinking, what possibly went wrong? Why aren't people buying these cars? Well, it's already started. Well, it's still very hard today to find a decent used car under $20,000. Now, as of the present market, and the prices seem to be dropping, but as it stands now, under $20,000 cars make up only 12% of the used car market. But in 2019, they made up 50% of the market. Of course, people are just greedy. They're asking too much. Now they are starting to come back down. But of course, it all has to do with the price of new cars. If the average new car is still pushing close to $49,000, $50,000, of course they're going to be asking 20 grand up for the used cars because they're going to say, well, you know, you want to buy a new one, that costs $50,000, $60,000. I'm only asking 22 for my used one. So that's the problem. The problem is if prices stay high on the new cars, the used cars won't drop too much. But I'm assuming it's only going to be a matter of time that the new car prices are going to start coming down quite a bit because they won't be able to sell them because people can't afford that much money for a car. People only have so much disposable income, and with things tight, hey, they're not going to go buy a $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 new car. And when they have to stop dropping the prices of the new cars, it's just a matter of facts historically, then the used car prices start plummeting too. They're starting to now, but they're still, like I said, there's only 12% of the used car market is under 20 grand. So it's still got a way to go before there's going to be any kind of really big deals out there. In general, there's always specifics. I get people bring me $4,000 or $5,000 used cars that are still pretty good that they found through a friend or church or somebody died or something. There's always something out there. But in generality, the large millions of them that used car lots sell, they're still way, way, way too expensive. H Snap says, should I lube my spark plugs? When installing spark plugs, do you lubricate it? We used to, but today, things are different. Back in the day, they had cast iron heads. Spark plugs screw into the heads. Now they're all cast aluminum heads. They're much softer, right? But the spark plugs you buy today already have the coating on them. They're usually plated. They're electroplated with all kinds of different materials, but they're electroplated correctly so they will not corrode and stick in the aluminum. If you do lubricate a modern one, you might find out later the spark plugs come flying out because the lube makes them not quite tight enough, and then they vibrate loose, and then they fly out when when you go down the road. Thousands and thousands of miles later. But you do not want to lube a modern car. Now, let's say you got a 65 Ford, sure. Those you want to lube. It's a different vehicle. But modern vehicles, the engines are different. The steels are different. You buy the right spark plugs, the original ones, they're already coated. They might be electroplated with chrome or something else, but they're already plated. You don't need to put anything on. If you do, they might fly out later because they'll get too loose and vibrate out, and they won't be torqued correctly because they're made to be torqued and dry, not torqued with lubricant in them. EK47 says, I got a strange issue with foamy substance in my expansion tank. There's a strange fluid in my expansion tank. The foam doesn't be pasty, but it becomes more visible when it's below 85 degrees Celsius. Then when it gets hotter, it seems to go away. One crucial point to note is hardly any pressure in my coolant system. I can open it, and there's minimal risk of burning. It's so low pressure, nothing comes out. What could be wrong? You said when it's a certain temperature, colder, it doesn't. When it gets hot, it doesn't. You've got some kind of sealing problem, because when it gets hotter, it's sealing, and as metal gets hotter, it expands. It could be the gaskets are starting to wear. You say there's hardly any pressure in your system, then you got a leak somewhere. Those vehicles are made to run at least 15 psi, 15 pounds per square inch pressure. So if it isn't, you got a leak somewhere. Either your radiator's warped and the cap doesn't seal, the cap's bad, or you got a leak somewhere in the intake manifold, on the head gasket. You don't have any pressure in a modern system, you got a leak, so get it pressure tested first. Put a pressure tester on it, see. And if you don't find any leaks when you pressure test it, replace the cap first. It could just be a bad cap. But you got a pressure leak somewhere, because there's no way a modern car is going to have at least 15 psi in it when you're running it hot. And if you open it when it's running hot, it'll spew all over the place. If yours doesn't, you have a leak somewhere, and you're going to have to figure out where that pressure leak is. Get a good pressure tester, pump it up, see where the leak is. And like I say, if you pump it up and the system shows no leak, well, then the cap's leaking, because you take the cap off to check. And if there's no leak in the system, that would mean the cap's leaking. Well, where there's a will, there's a way. Check this out. This dude built that car from scrap, from junkyards. Now, Kelvin's only 21 years old. He lives in Africa. And it's very hard to get cars there. I had a customer once who was a German, and he paid for his college education by every summer. He and 12 of his friends would each buy a car in Germany cheap, and they drove them to Africa, to South Africa, and then they sold them at a tremendous profit, even if 3 or 4 of them broke. They made so much money, it paid for all their college education. So cars are expensive in Africa. So this guy went to a junkyard, got a bunch of parts, and he ended up building this cool car all by himself. I mean, look at this thing. It's got gull wing doors. The guy went to junkyards, bought all different parts, put it together, and built that car, and he's 21 years old. A guy like that can do it. 21-year-old guy in Africa can do that. Why can't the car manufacturers make better cars? I don't know. I guess they don't have the imagination of this young guy in Africa who's only 21 years old. Hey, GM, Ford, Chrysler, maybe you should hire this guy. Have him design your cars. You say you want to recycle? This guy built the whole car out of nothing but recycled parts. Kind of amazing when you think about it. Shade Tree Car says, can a 3-ton Craftsman jack stand hold my truck up? 2 Craftsman 3-ton jack stands. Can I use them for my 02 Chevy Silverado 5.3? I want to be under the truck to change the transmission fluid. Thanks. As long as your truck isn't rotten, it's an 02, and there isn't rust, and then you put it in yellow and it crunches, they should be perfectly fine. 3 tons is 6,000 pounds. You're using 2 of them. You're picking up half of the vehicle. You're not picking the whole vehicle up in the air. And even then, it would probably still work. But realize that's rated for each jack stand, right? And you're only picking up half the vehicle. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. Now, check them to make sure. You said they're old. Make sure they're not rotten and rusted. Then, as long as they're still as thick as they came, yeah, it'll work perfectly fine. Just make sure that you jack up the front, that the back wheels you put chocks and put the brake on so it doesn't roll backwards. They should be perfectly safe. And do it on a level surface. Don't do it on a hill. Go to the bottom of the hill and do it. Well, here's an interesting conundrum. Can the Jews of California on Saturday ride in self-driving cars? Now, this comes from the Jewish News of Northern California. See, the thing is, observant Jews are not supposed to drive on Saturday or using electricity on Saturday. I don't know how far these people actually go. So now the big quandary is, can they drive around in Self-driving cars, since they're not driving and the car's driving, right? Well, believe it or not, there are Shabbat elevators, right? Because they're not supposed to operate the machinery, push the buttons. Well, they have Shabbat elevators in some of these buildings. They stop at the floor. You don't have to touch a button. These elevators stop and open their doors at every floor. So they just go up and down, opening and closing. And the rabbis say that's cool because you're not touching the buttons and you can use that electric elevator, but you can't touch the buttons on Saturday. No one knows why, but that's what the rule is. They're wondering, is an autonomous vehicle that drives itself, would that be like a Shabbat elevator? Well, rabbis are now arguing about it. As one rabbi says, not everyone is happy with the Shabbat elevator. They have philosophical arguments over whether that's breaking it or not. Here's his argument. I mean, we've got lunacy going on here. Many elevators make adjustments based on the weight of the passengers, which negates their neutrality of so they can't ride in one of those. By contrast, a running escalator or moving walkway might be okay. I swear people have lost their minds what they're analyzing. Talk about over-analysis, right? But we'll see what some of these rabbis come up with. Can you ride in an autonomous vehicle on Saturday? So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.